Hey, we are going to go ahead and get started. So welcome to the Women Tech Council Summit, the first female recession impact on women in tech. We're super excited for the conversation today. We have a powerhouse lineup for the summit today that are going to be talking about what has happened, what we are seeing. We're going to hear from some women in tech about their stories that we have been learning over this last year and what has happened, and also really talk about what we can do next as we're really faced with this first female recession and really understanding what it means and then how we navigate forward. I want to make sure we thank the Governor's Office of Economic Development for partnering with us on today's event and for really just joining in this effort, because it is such a critical conversation for what's happening in the economy and for really how we shape our future. So I'm going to share with you really quickly the agenda that we have for today so that you can see everything that we are going to be tackling, because we have a really all-star lineup, and then I'm going to jump right into our first speaker. So here is the agenda for today. We have Dr. Susan Matson, who's going to be joining us, and she's the founding director of the Utah Women and Leadership Project. And she's going to talk about where have all the women gone and really set the stage for us in this conversation. And then we have Lieutenant Governor Henderson joining us today. And then I'm going to give some perspective on what's happening specifically with women in tech. And then we're going to have an opportunity to hear from all of these women that you see here on their insights and specific stories around specific areas where the pandemic and the recession have had impact. And then we're going to talk about what it's going to look like going forward, how it's going to look like when we go back to the office, and what we can be in action on next. So it's going to be a really fast day with lots of critical conversations, a lot of things that we get to learn, and then really help us create the map and path for how we go forward from here. So with that, I'm really excited to turn the time over to Dr. Susan Matson and let her share where have all the women gone. And Susan, thanks for joining us today. I know you have a packed day with another event that you are also hosting. So thank you for taking the time to join us today.
Thanks so much. I actually have about 2,000 joining me in just a little bit. So it's, let me go ahead and share my screen. There, can you see everything good? Ready to go? All right, so I'll just dive right in because I just have about 10 minutes with you today. And I'm excited to talk about this topic. I actually wrote a short piece for Forbes with a similar title on where did all the women go. And this is really, what I'm going to share with you is really national data. And we have just completed we're in the middle of an analysis of a huge Utah study on the impact of COVID-19 on Utah women in work, but I don't have the data yet. That'll start coming out in reports in a couple of weeks, actually. So let me dive in. What we do know from the research is, and it's called the pink recession. That's kind of, there's other names for it, but the pink recession is the one that's kind of sticking. So what we do know is women have left or have considered leaving the workplace actually significantly more than men. And although the pink, this is what I put in my Forbes piece, although pink is often viewed as a pretty color, the pink recession is definitely not pretty. So let's just dive right in. So what we know is women have been affected by the economic downturn caused by the pandemic, of course. And early in the pandemic, there were actually 11.5 million women losing their jobs compared to 9 million men. So men are, of course, affected too, but we're seeing that disproportionate impact more with women. And in August and September, you can see a little bit less than 1 million left the labor force, 4 times the number of men who were no longer employed or looking for work. And in December alone, the US economy lost 140 jobs, and all of them were held by women. And then by early 2020, more than 4.3 million women had lost their jobs, and over 2 million had left the workplace either to take care of family members or because they could not find work. So that sets the stage for just some data to help us think about the United States. Again, shortly, we're going to start seeing those numbers in the state of Utah. What we know from research that's come out is 1 in 4 women are worse off financially than they were a year ago. And almost half of women are worried about having enough money to pay bills. So some of us in different income brackets and different industries may not have had those worries, but we know that that really affects a lot of women. And 40% of women have stopped working or reduced their hours because of caretaking demands, not just caretaking of their own children, but elder care and other kinds of caretaking since the beginning of the pandemic. That's a lot, by the way. 40% is a significant number or percentage. And what we do know as well, even though all women have been impacted in many ways, women of color and primarily Black and Latino women have been disproportionately affected by the economic downturn. In fact, in April of 2020, the unemployment rate for Black and Latino women was 16.4 and 20% respectively, which is very high. And you can just glance at these charts to get a feel of particularly the Hispanic women in some ways have really taken a brunt of the impact for many of them. I really appreciated this. This is from a article in the University of Utah magazine, a professor there that says, everybody who is vulnerable has now been more vulnerable. Everything that is unequal is more unequal in various levels. Also, COVID-19 has exposed Utah's and the nation's serious childcare crisis. Even before the pandemic, Utah was ranked as one of 3 worst states for the lack of access to licensed childcare providers, especially quality. Most people don't know that about the state of Utah. And we have reports at the Utah Women in Leadership Project on these issues. And a recent UN report about the impact of COVID-19 on girls and women said that unpaid care work and homeschooling, along with a lack of access to reproductive care and a spike in domestic violence, are actually concerns. We see this in Utah, nationally, and globally as well. And what we also know is 1 in 4 women have and continue to, even though we're turning the corner a bit with our vaccination, contemplate what they wouldn't have considered or what they would have considered unthinkable less than a year ago, and that is to downshift their careers, leave or downshift, go part-time. Again, in the state of Utah, we have this big study that we're going to be able to figure out what exactly has happened and is happening with Utah women in the workforce. Women's careers have been disproportionately. So we've talked about jobs, but now I want to shift for just a minute and talk about these careers. So our career paths, of course, we have been disproportionately impeded during the pandemic. Women working remotely with children are less likely to say that they've been more productive since the pandemic than men. The challenges of work-life balance during the pandemic, of course, is harming their careers. Men are more likely to say that working from home has positively impacted their careers, and that the pandemic has impacted, the men say, the pandemic has impacted men and women about the same. So think about that. That was an early study. Another study, women are more likely to have been laid off and furloughed during the pandemic, which has led to the instability of stalled careers. In addition to women who have already left the workplace, as many as 2 million more have considered, leaving, taking a leave of absence and so forth. Fewer women have and will stay on track for the future. And in this particular report, one of the biggest concerns, actually it's come up in almost every national report that I've looked at, that there's a real worry about, will it, we've made some progress on women in the workplace, specifically on careers. Will that be erased, or will that, we just move back a couple years with what's been happening? So these are the biggest challenges according to one study. Number 1, anxiety over the layoffs or furloughs. Number 2, these are in rank order, burnout. 3rd, women are saying mental health. 4th, childcare and homeschooling responsibilities, physical and mental health of loved ones, and financial insecurity. So those are, and so think about your own as I'm going through these, your own concerns. So when women are considering leaving or have left, this study provides some reasons on exactly These are linked to directly predicting whether a woman actually considers leaving or downshifting, going to part-time or doing something different. The number one was the lack of flexibility at work. Number two, feeling like they need to be available to work all hours. That's been very stressful for many women with the remote work. Third is housekeeping or housework and caregiving responsibilities due to the pandemic, worrying about their performance being negatively judged because of pandemic-related changes. Their discomfort with openly discussing their challenges with their managers or coworkers, feeling blindsided by decisions that affect their work. And 7 is interesting, feeling unable to bring their whole selves to work. So think about those as well. During COVID-19, mothers are I think this is fascinating. Mothers are more than 3 times as likely as fathers to be responsible for most of the housework and caregiving. That part is not a surprise, right? In fact, they are 1.5 times more likely than fathers to be spending an extra 3 or more hours a day on housework and childcare, equivalent to about 20 hours a week or a half-time job. This is interesting. When asked if they are splitting housework labor equally with their partners, more than 70% of fathers said they do, while only 44% of mothers said the same. So think about that. When it comes to child rearing, women see themselves, of course, having the heavier burden. And about 3/4 of mothers say they do, this is a different study, say they do more to manage their children's schedules and activities than their partners. Only 3% say their husbands do more. And again, this is a different study. Most fathers say that they're involved about equally, when mothers are 20% less. So that perception of who's doing the work is very interesting and different. And then women are more likely than men to be in low-paying jobs. And because of their concentration in low-wage and face-to-face job, they were particularly hard hit. And while many higher wage jobs could transition, and in the tech industry, you see more transitions as well, but many could transition to in-person. That is not the case for most low-wage jobs that really interact with customers and workers. So that first of the pandemic was so hard on many women around the country and in Utah, particularly in those face-to-face jobs. So I've gone pretty quick. I wanted to set the stage, and I appreciate being asked, wanted to really set the stage for the other conversations that you're going to have. But I have many, many recommendations, but I put them, limited myself to 3. So one is, and your organization's already doing this, but I think we can still do better. We need to shift policies and programs to meet employee needs. Take a close look at performance reviews. There's a lot of depth to that one that we can't talk about. And then focus on shifting norms around flexibility. Just very quickly, I do want to say that when I moved here 20 years ago to Utah, I had been doing research on flexibility in Minnesota and knew what was going on around the country. And we, in Utah, we're about 15 years behind some of that family-friendly policy and flexibility. And I really think that this last year has shifted our companies, especially our tech companies, to be thinking more and understanding that flexibility, in terms of many kinds of flexibility, can help companies and help the employees. And engage. The number one concern of women in the workforce in the state of Utah is childcare. That comes from about 3 different studies locally. Engage in those conversations and take steps to minimize gender bias as well, strengthen employee communication, and make work sustainable. And finally, I am a women's leadership scholar and professional. When we have struggles and crisis, we shut things down, and often we get rid of some of the training that we have, but continue to offer women's professional development. This is a pivotal time for companies, and they can rise and take bold action that are not only, protect hard-won gains in gender diversity, but also keep women in the workforce and keep them productive and healthy in enriching ways. Keeping women in the pipeline for leadership roles is one of my biggest concerns. And we can really do this as we work together. So overall, I know that was quick. Overall, though, I want to just encourage us all in our companies to be aware of the research that's coming out. Look at best practices. There is more and more research coming out for best practices, and encourage the people in our company, our leaders, to really look at that, to be able to strengthen the impact of women in our workforce, but also families and everyone. When you work with women and support women, it helps everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Susan. Everyone said, like, I need all of this data and a lot of time to digest it. It is such great insight, and thank you for sharing. I think you just perfectly teed off our conversation today. So I know it was a big ask for you to join us today. So thank you for doing that for us.
Thank
and
you
good
so
luck
much.
with your event today. Thank you. And so, okay, so one of the things I should say is what you're going to see over the course of today is a lot of really fast conversations. We wanted to take the opportunity to just charge this conversation forward and set the stage and hear from women so that we can take where Dr. Mattson was just talking to us about, which is how we go in action. So now I'm really excited to introduce the Lieutenant Governor Henderson. She was gracious enough to join us today, and she's had a really busy week, starting with International Women's Day and making a declaration on that day around the heritage of Utah women, and really embracing this conversation and starting to do work on how we get women out of this female recession. And so with that, I am going to give her the mic and let her take over and share some thoughts. Thank you again for joining us today.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. My goodness, I'm honored to follow Dr. Mattson. I adore her, and I think that the work that she's done is so important, just absolutely critical, to asking questions that a lot of Utahns are uncomfortable asking, and even more uncomfortable hearing the answers to. So I'm really appreciative of that, and I'm grateful to be here today to be able to join you, and I'm so grateful for what you all are doing to promote economic empowerment for women in the state of Utah. I've been involved in government service for about 9 years now, but my husband and I are small business owners, and I even ran a few businesses of my own prior to being elected to the Utah State Senate in 2012. And I also have some of my own experiences with dealing with the barriers that women in Utah may face when it comes to education and workforce training. So I really admire and I'm grateful for the focus that you bring to mentoring, to sharing best practices, and to eliminating barriers for women. There's a really long line of women in our state who have stood up and spoken out and acted to make things better for other women. And I'm incredibly proud and excited about the fact that we've been making a collective effort in our state in recent years to really highlight these women and learn from their examples. And in so doing, we've refocused our efforts on ways that we can improve life for women. And as Dr. Mattson said, for all Utahns. When we improve the lives of women, we improve the lives of all Utahns. Today, I want to talk really briefly about one of those women. I was just elected last November as Utah's second lieutenant governor. Olean Walker, as you all probably know, was the first woman elected to be lieutenant governor. She served for 10 years in that role until she became governor. I've always admired her work ethic, her leadership. When Olean was a young girl, she dreamed of becoming president of the United States, and she worked really hard throughout her life to become a strong and effective leader. She was actually PTA president at every single school that all of her 7 children attended, and she finished her doctorate degree while serving in the Utah House of Representatives. She earned a reputation as a doer and earned the respect of her colleagues who elected her to be Majority Whip in the House. Thanks to Olean Walker, Utah has a rainy day fund and a fund for affordable housing. She's got this great quote that I'm going to read to you. She once said, "Look at your life and ask yourself, what do I need to do for my children? What do I need to do for my neighborhood, my community? There are many worthwhile things for people to do. They just need to do them, not just talk about them." Women in Utah have a long track record of doing, and not just talking. We hear about the low college graduation rates among Utah women, the high domestic violence rates, and unequal pay for equal work. And this was all before COVID-19 struck. We know, as Dr. Madsen just showed all of us, we know that women are bearing the economic burden of this pandemic. Nationwide, there are 4 times more women than men who are leaving the workforce to care for their families as childcare options evaporate and schools shifted online. This was dubbed the She Session, and it's resulted in the disruption to work and education over the past year that has really disproportionately affected women. According to a recent Forbes article, because of the pandemic, the female labor force participation hit a 33-year low, effectively wiping out 30 years of economic progress in the course of a year. And while the nation continues to find its way out of this pandemic, Utah is really leading. The current unemployment rate in Utah is 3.1%, one of the lowest unemployment rates in the country. And really 3.1% is considered full employment here in the state. As many of you know, Utah has been ranked the best place to start and own a business by many prominent organizations, including Forbes, Amazon, and Verizon. Utah is also the best state when it comes to job creation, and we're the best state when it comes to business creation. So we've got all these really great things about our state, but there are also some challenges that we need to address. And I am not blind to those, and neither is Governor Cox, and we're very committed to addressing those. As our state and our nation emerge from this pandemic, we really have an incredible opportunity to rethink our support systems for women and families. Governor Cox and I are committed to, as Olean Walker said, to doing and not just talking. So as part of our One Utah Roadmap, which is the plan for our administration's first 500 days, we're working to boost opportunities for women through upskilling and retraining, scholarships and mentoring, improving childcare options, which is something really important that Susan talked about, Dr. Madsen talked about, and other creative solutions in concert with the private sector. We've started laying the groundwork to strengthen our current programs and also initiate new efforts that empower women and expand opportunities for advancement and leadership. And we're leading by example. So our administration has increased the number of women in our senior staff positions, in our cabinet, and in executive roles throughout state government. Like many of the incredible women who came before us, today's Utah women are innovative, courageous, and hardworking. I'm inspired by the strength and tenacity of the remarkable women who came before me, and I have just incredible hope in the next generation of women who will follow in our footsteps. We have a lot to learn from the past. Following the Great Recession of 2008 and 2009, we actually saw a surge in women entrepreneurs. These female-owned businesses helped stabilize the recovering economy, and they added 1.8 million jobs between 2007 and 2012. There's a story from the past. I love history, and I've been thinking about this little story and this quote for most of this past year, because it's so applicable to what we're going through right now. During the darkest days of World War II in 1939 and 1940, it was really hard for the British people to even imagine what victory would look like. They couldn't imagine victory. But Winston Churchill rallied their spirits. And by 1943, the war was beginning to turn in the Allies' favor. But still, Allied leaders were really concerned about when the war would end and what that end would look like. And in the spring of that year of 1943, with an eye toward the future, Churchill outlined his bold post-war plans. However, he warned that too many people had jumped to the conclusion that the war would soon be over and they'd be able to quickly resume life as they once knew it. And in his speech, he said, "The difficulties which will confront us will take all our highest qualities to overcome. But difficulties mastered are opportunities won." While today we're in the middle of a public health crisis that has tested not only the strength of our healthcare system and our economy, but has also tested our highest qualities of goodwill and humanity individually and collectively. And there will be a time when this war against COVID-19 is over. But right now, in the meantime, we've been presented with lots of difficulties. And through collaboration, through imagination, through courage, through hard work and partnering with each other and learning from each other, we can identify and address the challenges that women face, especially as the result of this pandemic, and turn those difficulties into meaningful opportunities to improve the lives of women and families in Utah. And I'm really excited to continue working to do that and hope to be able to work with each of you to be able to do that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. Those were the perfect words. I actually really loved that quote by Winston Churchill, right? If the difficulties we can overcome create opportunities that we can win. And I think that's one of the things that in the stories we'll hear today from women that is also so true. Like, you hear not just of the difficulties, but of how they've taken grit and tenacity and created opportunities for those. And even though we know we're nowhere near the end, that there's still this perseverance that will help us beat the war on COVID and the pandemic and overcome and change the trajectory of the recession. So thank you very much for joining us, and thank you for your leadership on this issue. So you can see, as we've had these great two women speak and tee up the conversation for us about what is happening and really provide a segue into what we're hearing from women in tech. Wanted to give you just a little bit of context about the conversations that we've been having in the tech community with women and how they're really grounded in all of the data that we just heard, but how we're moving forward. I mean, for many of us, right, we're basically at the 1-year anniversary of when the pandemic brought us to a screeching halt. We're seeing all the reports on that. I remember exactly where I was and what happened as an outcome of those specific moments. And I think we all remember those, right? And we remember the scramble for masks and toilet paper and school closures and what happened to graduations and meetings and all of the events and everything that was happening in our lives, and even the separations we might have felt between our family members. And immediately as the pandemic hit, our community started holding these weekly meetings where all of the members of the advisory board, there were 60 to 70 people every week, started coming together and immediately sharing what was happening in their companies, with their employees, with mental health, the challenges they were facing, what was working, and how to get through those. We even had to pull off our She Tech Virtual Summit with 3,000 girls in April, only a month after the shutdown. And we learned so much, and there's so much power in the community that we are and that we have created together. And what we saw is that, things were happening, and a number of months ago, as we were managing through the pandemic and we were continuing these conversations really for the entire last year with the community, we started to see the first signs that there was something bigger than going beyond just the pandemic, and this true shift for the impact of women, which we've heard all of the stats about from Susan. And she shared a lot of really great and important stats that don't go away with the vaccinations. And I think that we are now faced with this very delicate balance between handling all of the ramifications that the pandemic has created in this recession and finding a way forward. What we've heard specifically from women in tech is parallel to a lot of those comments that were made, but things like we've seen men get 3 times more promotions than women during this pandemic. Nearly half of all women feel like in technology feel like their career has been delayed because of the pandemic, because it becomes really overwhelming to think about moving to another job or what that looks like with all of the other weight that has been felt over the last year. 75% of women in tech are not considering a new job because of that. And 25% are considering completely leaving the workforce today. We also started to hear stories from our community that supported this data. And we started to see it in our own careers. In the middle of 2020, the company that I was running merged, and I transitioned out a lot with a number of other people in the company. And I was faced with finding a new job in the midst of the pandemic and figuring out what my future held. And I remember all of the overwhelming experiences that I had as I was trying to figure out what would make sense with all of the other pressures coming. And those stories are repeated time and time again from many of the women who are in our community. I started hearing the conversations around what was happening with childcare and the fact there was a lack of childcare and that many women couldn't figure out how to take care of their children and work at home, and the tax that was creating for them. We've heard about women who are making decisions, as Susan said, to even downshift and go back to part-time. And so now we're faced with all of these conditions that we have to figure out how to move forward. And all of those stories are actually what created the summit today. We wanted to kickstart the conversation around what we can be in action on, what we should be in action on, and how we don't lose 30 years of economic progress for women, because we can't take 30 years to recover it. We have to make a difference now. One of the things that I think is really powerful about the stories that we've heard is the first and foremost thing is that every story from hundreds of women that I've talked to shows that women are strong and resilient, that they are being smart and innovative and determined, even with all of the circumstances that they are faced with. And now, while they're doing more than ever before in a changing landscape, that what Lieutenant Governor just said is that they will and are finding the opportunities forward. We just all have to create more access and opportunities and acceleration for those so that we can build the community faster and stronger than it was before. And while all of these women that I see in their grit and their tenacity, we also know that it has a very real impact. And there are going to be huge gaps. There's huge gaps in pay. There's huge gaps in upward career mobility that we have to tackle. So we know that even after the pandemic is done and the vaccinations, which have been announced, will be available to everyone, starting in May, that our obstacles will still remain. And it will take us time to come through this. We get that the vaccine will protect us from COVID-19, but it will not vaccinate us against the challenges that we face. We have learned that a loss for women is a loss for everyone. And so there's so much progress that we have to do and that we have to continue to do in order to make great strides. One of the coolest things about the Women Tech Council community is that its ability to come together and learn and share best practices and rapidly adjust with this agile mentality for how we can make things better. And that is the best practice we are going to have to employ. We don't have all the answers today, but we know that we are in this recession and we know that we have to get out of it. And so that will take all of our creativity and our combined work and our changes inside of our companies in order to accelerate this and create more opportunity. And I'm really excited about the next set of conversations that we're going to have as part of today's discussion. We have stories from women that span all of the different types of conversations. Every piece of data that you have heard about so far today, we have a story from someone who's going to talk about what the pandemic and the preceding recession have created for them, and also just their stories of how they have navigated through that and some of the wins and successes that they have seen by that grit and persistence. And so to kick us off with the Women in Tech Insights series, we are first going to hear from Aniza Brown. She's the Agile Task Force leader at Northrop Grumman, and she's going to share her talk is titled A Female Brigadier General and My 2-Year-Old. And I'm going to pass it over to you, Aniza.
Hello, thank you, Women's Council, for allowing me to be here and share my story. So during 2020 and 2021, walking away from that experience with the understanding that leaders should be compassionate and sympathize with challenges mothers are facing, and it starts from the top. So at Hill Air Force Base, it starts with my Brigadier General. Compassion for mothers who are trying to do this juggling act of being of excelling in their career and being a mother, and then having schools and daycares closing. At the time, it feels like an impossible task, and it did. And I remember hosting a meeting with my boss at Hill Air Force Base, the General Van Hoffman, and the other senior leaders. And my son Max was in the midst of his terrible twos and came up behind my laptop and punched it while I was talking to the general. My laptop flew off the desk. I acted like I was falling off the side of the world. And at the end of the day, she understood that I was home with my child and that daycares were closed. But those for those who are fortunate enough to have compassionate leaders and somehow are more, somehow end up more likely to get through it. I mean, you need the help of your leadership understanding. So let me share an image. Nope, don't have access to it. Okay, so my General Van Hoffman, she was my leader, and she's the one who helped me get through it. This is where my story begins about my experience with compassionate leadership. I woke up one day to go and take my son to daycare. And as I pulled into the parking lot, the daycare was closed due to a COVID incident. Thank God my son hadn't been to school in a week. But at that point, I was trying to get to work early so I could brief the General on some upcoming initiatives that were really important to me, like pulsing our workforce at Hill Air Force Base and ensuring that we were hearing what people thought about how we were reacting to the pandemic, how we could do better. And it was a big thing because it's been the first of its kind. So I remember calling the executive and asking her to move the meeting back because daycare was closed and it's either me or my husband who can assist. I mean, unless daycare's open. So I called her, asked her to move the meeting. She talked to General Van Hoffman. General Van Hoffman didn't even skip a beat. She said, bring your son in and he can sit in the corner and play with markers during the meeting. And that's exactly how it went. My 2-year-old son sat in the corner playing with markers in our office. And I got a picture of her and him together. Because I mean, this is a female general allowing me to bring my child to a meeting. And it was just, I mean, that whole perspective is just awesome. And so I have a picture, and my son is so not enthusiastic about this picture. He has no idea how cool it is that a 2-star general, or a soon-to-be 2-star general, is holding him. And so with that, I just wanted to take a moment to thank my leadership, Mr. Fox and General Van Hoffman, for your compassionate leadership and allowing me to excel in my career. And then also my previous leadership, General Hawkins and Miss Love. I mean, they're the ones who made it possible for me to be a mom and a director. And then my call is for transformative leadership, to show compassion and understanding towards working moms. You have to have that understanding that you can work and you can be a mom, and it needs to be coming from the top. That's what I have for today. So thank you.
Thank you, Aniza. I love your story, and I think your call for compassionate leadership has never been more critical. We actually see a lot of studies, including one out of the Harvard Business Review, that have talked about empathetic leadership being one of the most important traits. And I think that will continue to be true. I think this is just, it's such a cool example of something that happened at the base with really senior leadership. And I think it's an example that we all need, because it's all in those conditions of things that have happened with the pandemic. So now I'm really excited to present our next speaker, which is Denise. And hers is around, Denise has moved a lot for jobs. She has a perspective on how that's changing now. And she's the SVP at Avid Exchange. I'm really excited to hear from you, Denise, and I'm passing it over to you.
Thanks, Sid. And I love that story about the general. It just gets me all emotional. So hi, everyone. I hope you guys can see me. It's coming up as a blank screen. Is everything going okay?
We can see you.
Okay, perfect. All righty. Okay, sorry about that. But I just wanted to share some thoughts. I have moved 13 times and I would say I have the great fortune to move 13 times for job roles and opportunities across both the US and the UK. And I've always made decisions that balance personal and professional goals. As an example, I might look for an opportunity that helps close a skill or experience gap on my resume where I want to ultimately go with my career. Another example of a personal balance is that I was living in San Francisco working for Visa, and my sister and her wife welcomed premature triplets to their family. And so I took a sales role in Delaware so that I could be close to DC and be an active aunt in their early lives. For everyone, though, I think the pandemic has created the opportunity to pursue new roles and opportunities without the disruption of physically relocating. And that sounds great because it removes some barriers for entry and has opened up the job market beyond a small radius, which could be better for families. And if we make an assumption that life will return to at least a new normal, being remote has knock-on impacts for companies. And I know we're dealing with this right now. The world got very creative, as you said, Sid, a couple of weeks this time last year, and moved everybody home. But if you think about it, we kind of picked up what we were doing and we moved it online. And if anyone is still like me, I'm still in meetings all day, every day, but just from the comfort of my personal space. And when some people are back in the office and can be in the same conference room while others are remote, will we fall back into that poor behavior where remote employees are still struggling to get a word in? Communication has to happen when everyone is remote. But what happens with the hallway conversation? So companies are grappling with, and they need to take stands on things that are important to employees. Like, are they really open to having senior roles outside of headquarters? Or what are promotion opportunities for remote workers? What does the long-term integration look like for a larger hybrid workforce? And I think employees need to ask these questions also, but they also need to get skilled on how to select a potential employer. In addition to the questions that I mentioned, like promotion, how often are you expected to travel to headquarters or other locations? But also, how do you assess a culture? How will you build relationships outside of Zoom meetings? How will you continue to build and expand your professional network in ways that aren't limited to physical presence? I think we all agree that we are in control of our careers, and the best way to maintain that control is to continue to build trusted networks. I know that many of my opportunities were because of my network. The guy who hired me in Dallas hired me in London. The guy who hired me in Atlanta, he also hired me in Utah and in North Carolina. As we all navigate the next couple of years where the opportunities are more plentiful because the location barrier isn't so severe, I think it's never been more important to have a strong professional network. So I would suggest that everyone double down on continuing to build your network of trusted individuals who can keep you in mind for your next move, so that they can also help vouch for potential bosses and new companies and their cultures. In this hybrid world, I love that everyone, especially women, can cast their nets far and wide in order to find the most challenging roles of their careers, and that companies are rethinking all aspects of making what makes a great employee, and how to continue to grow and reward remote employees with more accountability and promotions. I also get excited that companies may not have the immediate expectation that you will relocate. That relocation can be a mutually beneficial decision. But all of that said, I have loved moving around and getting to know new people, new places, new cultures. So ultimately, I'd encourage you to never rule it out. But I'm not looking to move.
That's good. Well, and we're really glad that for the gentleman who hired you to Utah so that you could become part of our community and become part of our network. It's such a great story, and it's been so amazing to watch that progression of you as you've moved, but this different perspective that's happening now and the things that companies are changing that better support women who might not want to move 13 times, but who still want to be connected. Thank you, Denise. Okay, and now up next, we have Allison Lutmeyer. She's group manager of the customer feedback programs at Adobe, and she's going to talk about investing in yourself. I remember, Allison, about 4 months ago when you were sharing some insights about things that you were working on, and I was so inspired by what you were committed to for the professional development that you were investing in, and I'm really excited to hear what you have to say today.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sid. I really appreciate it. I feel honored to be on the agenda today amongst so many amazing women. This is really, truly a pleasure. So when you're comfortable, you aren't growing. I can imagine a lot of us were uncomfortable in 2020, from a global pandemic to a sudden shift in remote working and all that came with it. Even if it wasn't necessarily what you had in mind for your 2020 personal growth plan, we all learned real time about adapting, resilience, prioritization, and the importance of self-care and personal connections. Adobe believes in fostering a culture of learning to drive employee engagement, career growth, and to support the business. They provide $10,000 per year education reimbursement, which helped me finish my MBA in 2010. They also provide $1,000 per year for professional development, such as conferences, workshops, online courses, business books, and even language courses. But keep in mind, there are plenty of free learning opportunities that anyone can take advantage of online or through the Utah Women in Leadership Project that Dr. Susan Madsen founded. Companies advocate professional development because they understand the impact on their employees. It spreads knowledge for greater organizational effectiveness and aids in succession planning. Employees want to learn for personal and job satisfaction. It helps them stay current with industry trends and new technology. Companies can attract better talent. Every conference or training seminar that an employee attends, they become a brand ambassador for that company. It also helps increase retention rates. In a recent Gallup survey, 87% of millennials rated career growth and development opportunities as important to them in their job. In 2019, I had the opportunity to participate in Leadership Circles, which is a year-long Adobe-sponsored leadership program for high-performing women. It focused on 10 practices of personal leadership, such as creating a vision, crafting your brand, executive presence, and building a team. That experience has been invaluable in my career growth. This past year, I participated in the forum's Level Up and Financial Fluency workshops, which provided me the opportunity to reflect back on my Leadership Circles learnings. I needed the time to step back, practice these skills, because I was so stuck in the heads down mode of getting it done during the pandemic that I had neglected my personal development plan. This program, along with my manager's support, provided me the space to think about my career, lean in, and work on applying my long-lost career plan again. I was able to practice self-advocacy in a remote setting, learn about promoting my employees in a COVID world, update my personal brand, understand company financials better, and grow my network by meeting people I wouldn't otherwise have had the opportunity to. This networking even benefited my Adobe side gig of participating in our Adobe diversity inclusion efforts by meeting other D&I champions across various companies. So in closing, what advice would I share about investing in yourself? 1, I recommend participating in development courses, whether new or refreshers. They may share information you already know, but over time we forget. It's a great opportunity to sharpen those tools. Number 2, get out there and find a mentor. You don't need to forge your path alone. Someone has likely already blazed it for you. Learn from them, their mistakes and their successes. 3, become a mentor. Even if you're new in your career, you don't realize how much knowledge you have until you sit down and start talking about your work or even your school experience. And trust me, I've gotten just as much out of those opportunities as I have given. Number 4, network. You have to be more deliberate about it now, but on the flip side, it's never been easier to chat with someone in Australia or Germany as I have been able to do, even just this morning. Accomplishments. Don't forget to log your accomplishments. It is so much easier to do it as they happen than to go back and try and recall at the end of the quarter or even at the end of the year. And 6, most importantly, raise your visibility. Nobody will promote yourself like you will. Take the opportunity to set up a skip level. Reach out and meet your leaders adjacent to you. Let others know the accomplishments you and your team have achieved through newsletters or brown bags. Make yourself known. Investing in yourself now, regardless of your current role, will assist you in your next chapter. As I mentioned at the beginning, to grow, you need to sit outside your comfort zone. Not once have I learned something valuable without feeling uncomfortable at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. And those were an amazing, great 6 points. And you are just a perfect example of creating that refocusing on that professional development roadmap. I think that was a really great capture and really nicely distilled down into something all of us have to be thinking about, including myself. It's this constant conversation. It's been really easy to forget ourselves this last year. So next up, we have Paige Checketts, and she's with the Utah Child Care Cooperative. Paige started working on the child care crisis, which existed way before the pandemic and has now worsened dramatically. And so she's going to share a little bit about how she's working to solve the child care crisis.
Thanks, Sid, and thanks, Allison. I'm inspired. All of these talks have inspired me for sure. I started the Utah Child Care Cooperative, or UC3, because I left my profession 20 years ago because there was no childcare options for me. And like our Lieutenant Governor said, through Olean Walker's quote, we got to do something about it. We just got to dig in and do something. And I want things to be different for my children and my grandchildren. And so I have surrounded myself with a lot of great people who have the same passion as I do about this issue. And we all believe that everyone should be able to contribute to the economy without compromising the well-being of their children. And so just to lay a little foundation, I know people have already talked today about childcare, the status of childcare, but let me give you just a little bit more, and then I'll talk to you about our solution. So affordability. The HHS defines affordability in childcare as no more than 7% of your household income. So think about it. How much are you paying for childcare? And is it 7%? Probably not. Our data shows that only about 12% of Utahns find childcare affordable for them. A family making the state median income pays about 21% of their income to childcare, and that's for 2 children in childcare, an infant and a 4-year-old. So that's more than it costs to send your child to university. So it's not affordable. And how has COVID affected that? Actually, in some ways for the better. Because of the CARES Act, we've been able to get monies to childcare providers to help them subsidize their programs until things get back on their feet. So that means that co-payments have been dropped and providers aren't having to decrease the quality of their program because of it. They've also been able to address the health issues in their programs with that money. So that's been a huge blessing. Another great thing for families is that the state has increased the level of subsidy available. So it used to be if you were at 58% of the income threshold, then you could get a subsidy, but now they've increased it to 85%. So if your family's making around $65,000 a year, your household income or below, then you can qualify for a subsidy. So if that's something that works for you or in your family, then go ahead and reach out to the state and initiate that process. Because of the stimulus package that just passed this week, that looks like that'll be in place until 2024. So that will be a blessing for all of us if you want to take advantage of that. Accessibility. Dr. Madsen talked about the accessibility. She said we're one of the 3 lowest in the nation. We are actually the lowest. So 77% of all Utahns live within a childcare desert, which means that there's more than at least, there's 1 child seat for every 4 or more children. And so, yes, we have a lot of children. We'll always probably be in that lower bracket of states, but we don't need to be last. It's because we just don't have the infrastructure that we need to tackle this. We don't have the support that we need. And so that's a problem. You probably remember before the pandemic, wait lists and trying to find somebody and trying to find a place. Some families are splitting up their kids into this center and that center, running all over the county trying to get their kids. That's not helpful. That is not helpful. That's what makes women want to work or want to quit work. So the pandemic has affected that in that a lot of people have quit. As we've talked about, they've left. And so there are openings in childcare centers now. We're about at 83% enrollment as we were before the pandemic. So if you're looking for childcare, now's a good time to get on that list, but the trajectory is going back up again. It won't be long before that is not the case anymore. And, is there an opening close to you? Is it convenient for you? We're not sure about that. So then quality, that's the 3rd metric that we look at. And quality in Utah is coming along. The state is working on a quality rating system so that you can see how well your program is meeting evidence-based principles for high quality childcare. Right now, out of 373 childcare centers in the state, only 25 are high quality. It costs money. It takes a lot of time and focus and attention. You can go on careaboutchildcare.com to see those ratings. You can ask your childcare provider why they don't participate in that. It's a fairly new program, and they are now just starting this year to do the family home providers as well. So that's a great step in the right direction. A lot of those centers that are reaching high quality are doing so because they are subsidized by a government agency, a church, a university, or a hospital. So we know that government or organizations that subsidize childcare helps them be higher quality. So that's where we come in. What is our solution to all this mess that we're in, that we're all struggling with? It's to include employers. Employers need to take a step into this realm. Now, we don't want you to go out and build your own childcare center. We have high quality childcare providers ready to expand, ready to provide the best childcare available. What we need is employers to subsidize it, to subsidize each child that they send from their company to that center. That makes businesses of all sizes, medium, small, large, all of them can participate in a consortium style model. So we, before the pandemic, had a building permit to get started on a center right by the Frontrunner station in Lehigh. And then Lehigh City put that on hold. So we need to know that businesses are interested, that they want us to build this, that they're willing to subsidize it. It's financially a smart thing to do. The cost of a turnover to lose an employee, it doesn't even compare to this little subsidy. So that the subsidy allows you to pay market rates, your employer to subsidize, increases the quality at a location that works for you and is helpful for the workforce. So it's a great solution. We're excited about it. We're also doing a lot with legislators, business leaders, city government leaders, land developers. We're asking them to consider childcare in all these kind of development and projects that are going on in the state. They really need to consider it. And we're passing bills and speaking out on bills. We're doing a lot advocating for you. We're your voice on the Hill. So let us know what you need us to say and what you want us to say and do, but you need to reach out to your legislators as well. Our legislature is not very kind to childcare bills. It's been excruciatingly disappointing. So reach out to your legislators, let them know what to do and what you want. Tell your employers, as others have already said, speak up and let them know what the challenge is and what you would like to see. And then let them know that we have their solution and tell them to give us a call. Thanks, Sid.
Thanks, Paige. Thanks for sharing all of that great data. It is a crisis. It continues to be one, and we have to be in action. I appreciate the call to action too, that we need all of our voices to help solve it, because it will take really creative solutions. So thank you very much for sharing that. Okay, into our next conversation, I'm joined by Amelia Wilcox. She is the CEO and founder of Zenovate, and she's going to talk about how COVID completely impacted her business, and then also the success that she's seen as she had to pivot through that. She's had a really great story as an entrepreneur about the impacts of COVID and where she's at now. Amelia, I'm really glad to have you, and I'm passing it over to you.
Awesome, thanks. I'm so excited to be here. So I'm going to take you guys back just 12 short months ago. Is the beginning of March. I had a little company called Incorporate Massage that I had been running for 10 years. And we brought on-site massage programs to businesses. So companies would hire us to come in and massage their employees at work as part of a wellness program. So we worked with a lot of companies locally, like Entrada and ClearLink, Unique, companies like that, where we would just provide massage benefits for their employees. But it was done at work. The employer paid for it. And I'm sure you guys can imagine what that did to our business when COVID hit. People weren't going into work anymore, and they were not, we're still not allowed to touch people in many states. So we were on track. We had like the best Q1 ever. We were blowing up all of our goals. We'd done like half of 2019's revenue just in Q1 of 2020. So awesome trajectory. We were on the Inc. 5000 the last 2 years, Fast 50 here in Utah, the Utah 100, just growing exponentially. It was so awesome. And then we were on track to do 6 million in revenue for 2020. And we, in 10 days, watched it just go to zero, which was the most excruciating experience I've actually ever had in my life. It was so hard. I had to furlough my entire team on March 13th. It was Friday the 13th, and just sit down with the other people on my executive team and say, what problem can we solve now? We have this awesome platform we built. We were an on-demand kind of technology-enabled services business. So we had this awesome logistics platform. We looked at everything from like dog walking at like food delivery. We had like asked our clients, asked on social media, just trying to find a need that we were equipped to fill. And so we started having all these conversations with our clients and started to recognize there were some emerging needs, right? Like people were feeling disconnected from their company. People were feeling disconnected from each other. People weren't taking very good care of themselves physically or mentally. So we kind of decided to, we have a system, we just need to build a few things onto it, and then we can actually offer some virtual services. And so our initial goal was just to prevent the companies we had on contract from stopping paying us. We were like, how do we bring them some value, provide a service that they'll continue to keep paying their contractual fees? Because we couldn't hold them to their contracts because, we weren't legally allowed to even hold up our end of the bargain. So I kind of rolled out, we pulled our 1,200 massage therapists, and we previously had worked with 4,000 companies across the US, companies like Intel and Disney and Red Bull. We'd done massage for all these companies. And I pulled our 1,200 massage therapists and I said, what else can you guys do? What else is, do you have certifications and licenses in? What can we deliver virtually? And we came up with a list of like 6 or 7 different service types. We were doing like guided meditations on Zoom, yoga classes, fitness classes. We rolled out life coaching. And then 2 things happened. The first thing that happened is we had all these companies saying, hey, we want our team in the UK to be able to watch this video and do this yoga class or whatever it was. They're like, can you record this for us? And so that kind of sparked my first idea. We just started recording a bunch of things, put them in a content library. And then I said, okay, I'm going to go out and see if I can sell it. And we were able to sell it. Employers were looking for a virtual wellness solution. So we kind of were able to fill in that niche. And then the other thing that happened is we had all these life coaches on staff, and they started coming to me and they were like, man, these people have like real problems. They need help. We have people coming in that are struggling with anxiety, having, thoughts about suicide, and like life coaches, it's just a certification. They're like, hey, we need a place to send these people. And so I started getting on the phone calls with all these different local mental health clinics and mental health companies, and just talking to them and saying like, hey, can we set up some sort of a referral program? And then what happened was super interesting, because every single one of them said the same thing. They said, we do not have bandwidth. We are like backed up. The demand is huge. So the next thing I did is I said, all right, well, nobody can help us. There's clearly a huge need, and there's clearly a shortage in supply. So my next move is, okay, let's see if we can hire some of our own in-house licensed counselors. We already had a recruiting team that was experts at going out and just hiring tons of massage therapists all over, North America. So can we put that same team to use hiring just a different type of professional? And my first thought was, hey, we're not going to find anybody because there's so much demand. Clearly, all of them must be employed, and, we must have a shortage on our hands. But that didn't turn out to be the case. We were able to hire quite a few licensed counselors, and we just rolled it out in Utah. October 1st was our first client that we launched here in Utah with our teletherapy benefit. And it's just grown from there. It's been, I'm closing like so many accounts a week. Right now, I'm still the sales team. We're actually recruiting right now for sales, if you guys want to send anybody my way. But The other thing that started happening on my personal life is, so I have, my youngest is 9 and she has ADHD, the most severe that exists on the scale. And she has an anxiety disorder, and coupled together, that's just, it's a bad mental health recipe because she'll hyperfixate on things and then get so worked up and she can't go to sleep. Like even last night I had to lay down with her in my own bed until she fell asleep, and she's 9, because she got so upset about the fact that she thought leprechauns were real. For any of you that don't know, they're not. And she was just devastated. So that's what I've been dealing with. But when COVID hit, it got so much worse because she's doing school at home and she's doing, she's isolated from her friends and she's having self-esteem issues. And like, I just met with her teachers on Monday about, issues that she's having at school. And so I've already got this. The pandemic took it to the next level with all the things that went along with that. And then my 15-year-old daughter she just started getting really sad all the time. She would go and sleep in her room after school for hours. We wouldn't see her, just would have like these emotional blow-ups. And so I've got my oldest daughter struggling with depression. My youngest daughter's anxiety is like out of control. My husband's a firefighter paramedic and he has PTSD. And then, his stuff was also bad. And I've got my own stuff that I've got to deal with. So I'm trying to run this business, and all of the family's like mental and emotional needs end up on my shoulders, right? I'm even with my 15-year-old, my husband's like, I don't know what to do about that. And I'm like, okay, I'll get her a therapist and we'll try all these different things. So that's one of the things that I noticed. I'm not the only one. I have a lot of entrepreneur friends, female friends who have some of those exact same needs. It's like, in general, the mental and emotional needs of the children fall on the mother's shoulders. So anyway, so yeah, I was just meeting with some of my friends earlier this week that own businesses. One of my friends owns a foods business, and they kind of ran into their own problems where no stores were like opening up and taking new products. They were just only keeping their existing products, which surprised me because I thought the grocery stores were doing awesome. Nobody's going out to eat, everybody's going to the store, but that was not the case. And so now they're taking new vendors, and she's like, how do I stand out from the crowd? How do I, there's this huge backlog, and how do I break through the noise? And at the same time, has her little boy with her at home and just trying to manage all of that. So I think women in general are just more susceptible to this, just because we are in general more empathetic and compassionate and in tune with our kids' emotional needs. So in closing, the actions that I think are needed. One more thing. We do employ a lot of women. We've always been a remote team. I started this company when I was a stay-at-home mom with 2.5 kids, and have had my kids home with me and trying to grow the company at the same time. So we got 2 men on our team and like 15 women. So we're primarily female and a lot of flexible employment options. And so even some of our full-time female employees, due to the lack of childcare that we were just talking about in the last speaker, she had to go part-time because there's just nobody in Florida that she can afford to have come in. The people who are still doing childcare are just crazy expensive. And so we are in a position where we're able to offer very flexible employment. And I think we just need to see more of that from employers. And what's awesome about it is they are educated, they are experienced, they are passionately loyal, right? I have women who have been with me from the beginning 11 years ago, who are still here today, and people can flex up and flex down. I mean, how do you put a price on that kind of loyalty? That they saw us through this crazy pandemic when we were down to 0 and had to be furloughed for a while and then come back part-time. The loyalty and dedication is just, I've never seen it matched in any other way. So these moms who want to work are just, I can't say enough positive things about them. And then, yeah, women are just really strong and resilient. We're going to overcome this. This is not going to stop us. We are amazing at just, figuring out how to adjust, reprioritize, and just get through life, with grit and hard work. So anyway, flexible employment opportunities, look for those women who have amazing experience and education, and bring them into your organizations. It will do nothing but make the business better overall. Thank you.
Thank you, Amelia. Thank you for sharing your story and being so vulnerable to share your story, and for the amazing grit that you have had over the last year as you had to completely reinvent your business, provide for your family, and handle the mental stresses. And as Amelia just said too, which is a really nice transition into our next conversation, that moms that Amelia's been in a remote workforce for 11 years, and she's had a lot of moms that have been a part of that company. And there's a lot of conversation now about what it looks like and how also in tech, we help provide new opportunities for moms or people who are doing returnships and coming back to work. So I'm really excited to hear from Trina Limpert. She's the CEO of Rise Next, and she is focusing a lot on how my moms are finding a new career in tech and what it means to help them get into tech from other industries, because tech affords so much opportunity. So I'm really excited to hear from her. Trina, it's all yours.
Thank you. And I have to say thank you to Amelia, because that was so great in sharing all your work, which is amazing. But then talking about your personal real life, I think sometimes we kind of don't talk about real life, right? Like, I think this is the point where we got to all talk about real life. I have 3 sons, 5 stepkids, so it's like 27 kids. There is a lot of real life happening in my life. And all the work I'm going to talk about today is only there because of my team and other women that are helping me. And so I have to give kudos to Mikkel and Robin right off the bat. And I see that probably with every other team, just, that's how we're getting through this. So I just wanted to say thank you for that, first of all. Just to get started, what if each of us were to tap one woman on the shoulder and tell them, you would be so great in tech? These taps on the shoulder don't just change these women's lives, but their children, their companies they work for, the society, and the economic impacts, they're just immeasurable. At Rise Next, we know that tech jobs are mom jobs, and we do corporate consulting and community programs to rise up that next level of diverse technologists and professionals. And our Tech Moms program removes barriers that we've talked about all day, barriers in childcare, financial aid, networking, and we provide a community of support. Our mantra being, once a tech mom, always a tech mom. Not just through the program for 2 months, but ongoing, that support and network that's there to make sure that they're continuing in their career, they're able to move forward, they can answer questions, they've got a community support to help them get through their career transformation journey. So we provide introductory skills in coding, HTML, CSS, and some JavaScript. But we also connect with professionals that are out in the industry and conduct workshops in product management, UI, UX, project management, quality assurance, data analytics, right? The tech industry is so much bigger than just tech. We take this massive industry called technology and we shorten it into half word and call it tech, and we say, okay, everybody gets it. Well, they don't. And so we really have to demystify this industry and explain what the opportunities are and give them enough of an understanding of the tech industry to be able to find their right fit. So Hillary Clinton stated it best: women are the largest untapped reservoir of talent in the world. And we're building that bridging pipeline of talent that will help us tap in and access this underutilized resource. 18 months ago, I connected with Mikkel Blake, who'd gone through a similar program out of Silicon Valley called Mother Coders. And we knew we had this shared vision to provide access to this resource pool, to create awareness of the opportunities awaiting for them in the tech industry, and then prepare them to transition. And we were joined shortly after by Robin Scribner, who just before COVID hit in 2020, we was right at the cusp of it. We'd been planning, we knew we were doing this, we were putting things together, programs were coming together, we're working on it, and then bam. And we had to take a pause. And I remember this meeting very distinctly where we all sat down and said, first of all, what the heck is going on? Do we know what's going to happen? And second of all, do we continue? We'd had a lot of work in the pipeline and getting corporate sponsorships with higher education partners. We work with Weaver State and Utah Valley University, and all this work was going on. And we had to stop and say, well, do we continue or do we not? And we jointly decided we're going to move forward. We knew that this needed to happen. We didn't know what was happening with COVID, but we knew that this was important, COVID or not COVID, for women in the workforce. And it was a major unknown, major risk. We didn't know what was going to happen, but we knew and felt like the work couldn't stop. And what we didn't realize at that time was just how important our efforts were going to be in being able to address the impacts that COVID would come and impact so many women across our state, across everywhere. Just like everything you've heard today, we had no idea that this female recession or the pink recession, and that, you know, we just knew we needed to move forward. So we were really challenged in making sure we had proper spacing, childcare safety, temperature checks, and even our technical trainer, Adrienne Error. She's amazing. She was in our Lehigh program, who came in to teach. She was a high risk, but she showed up anyway. She was double masked in the screen, and you know, all those hours she still persevered, and we taught all these women coding over this last fall. And we dealt with quarantines and closures. I had our childcare person in our Weber office actually get COVID, and we had to shut down, and shifts. Like we were just flying all over the place, trying to just make sure we could pull this all together, but we did it. And in the end, we made it happen. And so I wanted to share today 3 of the successes we've had. And there's so many. It was so hard to choose and identifying, because the impacts aren't just in transitioning to tech, but these women's lives are being transformed. And people are taking notice and coming into the program because they've noticed this woman transformed her life. I'm not sure what's going on, but tell me about what happened. And they end up in the program, and they're now in. And so that's that power of one that I was talking about, tapping somebody on the shoulder and saying, hey, did you know that this is even an option for you? So 3 of the successes we've had in these last months, we graduated 27 women that completed in November. And we currently have 30 students in class right now. So both in Lehigh and Ogden, with a Tech Moms Latinas specific group, an online program that we're trying to put together as well. And then we want to expand, you know, Tech Moms, women of color, like we're really focused on diversity and really getting into marginalized communities and overall the impact that could be had here. So 3 of the experiences that I wanted to share today. The first is Valerie Whit, single mom. She was a music teacher. She was completing a full stack developer boot camp, but she's been completing that and then hired by Skillstruck as an area partner manager. But what's even more incredible about her story, not just this transition into tech, but she's an advocate for computer science education. She has, if you go pull her up on LinkedIn, she has a coding is for everyone on her LinkedIn page. I love that. So her purpose she's found in this program is to change how computer science is taught, taking her own experience in learning and applying it to new methods, new approaches, and improved tech education. You think about the impact women have and can bring to this industry. That's what we're losing out on when we don't put women in and we don't support. The next I wanted to share was Liza Del Yar Santos. So Del was laid off during COVID, but someone at her prior company had taken an interest in her and gave her that tap on the shoulder I was talking about. When they had to shut down, she was left struggling to know where to go. She had a master's degree and she couldn't get hired. So she came to Tech Moms, committed to tech because somebody had done that tap, and she was recently selected out of 300 applicants for a full ride scholarship to V School and is now heads down on becoming a full stack developer. Our third one I wanted to share is Renee Flores. And she was working at the Postal Service. She had a strong interest in tech and she was taking classes in the evenings, but after Tech Moms, she realized that you can make a jump sooner than that and you don't have to wait. And she's now in technical support at Degreed. Not only that, but she is the Tech Moms Latinas, the Tech Moms Latinas program we're working on is her brainchild. She came to me one day and she said, Trina, I love this program. I want to get it out there, but I want to see it in the Latina community. And she's been working with us part-time for Rise Next as a program manager and also helping us launch the Tech Moms Latina program. We've had 2 of our students recently accepted at WGU for CS programs, 2 at UVU and CS, UI UX at the U. Each one of these communities supports and lifts one another as each woman transforms their lives. 40% of our grads have moved into technical education paths, with the majority being in full stack development, 20% in UI UX, 10 in cybersecurity, 20 in data science reporting, 10 in tech related disciplines like product and QA, and even some of our moms continuing to run their own business. When working with women in tech, it's less about the tech, it's more about the women. Our success has been in creating an experience that enables them to fly. Companies that make a shift to removing barriers, supporting family needs, and investing in their development will see that they have one of the strongest and most diverse workforces, and probably way ahead of their competition. So in ending, my vision, my personal vision in starting all of this was that Utah becomes where women go to have a fulfilling career in tech and successfully raise their families. I would challenge everyone here, tap someone on the shoulder, and that every company represented here today establishes their own Tech Moms program and creates bridging opportunities for women that are looking. And we're here to support. And with your help, we can take advantage of those post-COVID opportunities, those silver linings and remote workforces and flexibility and all of those things, and make a strong shift or a pivot, just like Amelia did. We need to make a shift and pivot right now to rise up that next level of diverse technologists. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Trina. And it's such important work. We heard Lieutenant Governor Cox also talk about all the work the state is doing to help transition women and create these returnships. And there's so much work to be done there. So we're going to keep going with our awesome agenda. So up next, we have Karen Rodriguez. She is the head of diversity and inclusion at Purple. And she's going to talk a little bit about how she's leading diversity and inclusion efforts and what that's looked like through the last year. And I'm really excited to hear from you, Karen. So take it away.
Hey, thanks for having me, Sydney. I really appreciate it. Oh, can you hear me okay?
Yes, you sound great.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you, ladies, for joining us today. It's been a really packed day, but I hope that this part of the presentation is truly insightful. As you've previously heard, COVID-19 has disproportionately kicked women out of the workforce and caused a female recession. And that actually has set us back 30 years, which is a lot, right? The Economist recently shared that in America, just 55.8% of women are active in the workforce. Prior to last year, participation hadn't been this low since 1987. This mass exodus in the workplace has unfairly pushed us out of the workplace and pushed us into child and family care responsibilities, or completely exhausted us by overly demanding that we juggle work from home newness, motherhood, and the mental exhaustion from lack of work-life balance. So as we think about inclusion work, we now have to start from scratch to bring women back, and not only back, but meet our equitable standards. I actually consider myself incredibly fortunate to not have lost a job during the pandemic. However, I did have a lot of costs that strained my mental and physical well-being. You know, the pandemic brought about the challenges of being away from my family, right? The challenges of new work from home, which, by the way, I was not the best work from home student. So you can imagine the type of challenges I faced, right? Trying to get acquainted and adjusted. But it also brought about a social uprising. And I, as a community leader, really had to step into this space. In all honesty, the breadth of 2020 was so difficult that it even caused a miscarriage in a time where I felt alone and overwhelmed. And it happened when women were being dismissed from work at a larger and faster pace. So even though all of that was happening, I was forced to move forward without any support from the company I was working with prior. And not only that, but I was not able to take the proper time to heal or cope with a huge loss I had had in order to meet a particular quota. And I know that I'm not the only woman who experienced this during the pandemic. Actually, according to the Labor Bureau, women felt so overwhelmed and so undersupported by their companies and their leadership that by last September, an eye-popping 2,651,000 women had left the US workforce. That's actually 4 times more than men. 4 times. In truth, while we were all experiencing hardships, our plights as women went untethered and unaddressed by companies. Our challenges as mothers, as students, as community leaders, and the challenges of adjusting to new set of work rules while juggling all those other facets of our lives were merely recognized. But that's where we must head now. Now that we know, now that we've seen the disproportionate loss of women in the workplace, how it affects our families, how the scars from this time can linger, especially given the consequences for financial stability for women. Now that we know that according to a report from the Institute Women's Policy Research, an employment gap of just 1 year leads to a 39 decrease in annual earnings, and that actually increases over time. Now that we know that, we must get to work. Here's the silver lining though, which is my favorite part about all this, is that even though we're in this place where we were in 1987, because of the phenomenal work that D&I practitioners have done over the past 30 years, we can do it better. We can do it intentionally and bring women back, promote them, and build out their skills and experience and pay them more money. So I want you to take away 4 key strategies today. And hear me when I say this. There are 4 key strategies that go beyond hiring initiatives and an unconscious bias training. There are 4 real strategies that you can take to push for gender equity at your company. Number 1, audit your company's demographic makeup. And I don't just mean looking at the overall makeup of your company, but audit the company's leadership makeup, right? How many of those are women? How many of those are men? Use this to build out a strong internal promotions program for the women at your company. Number 2, create a mentorship program that connects the women to senior leaders in and outside of your company, like all of the fantastic women that are on this call, right? And dedicate budget to equipping the women inside of these programs with certifications and accredited trainings that can be used outside of your workplace. Number 3, evaluate your pay structure to ensure pay equity across the board. If you find that women are underpaid, match them to their male counterparts. And I wholeheartedly mean that. Match them. And I would even go beyond that. Provide bonuses to account for the missteps previously taken. And Anissa Brown is from Northrop Grumman. Northrop actually did this with a team. My husband is a part of Northrop, and they did this with a team when they found out that he too was being underpaid and that he wasn't being paid fairly and equitably to the other people that were held to the same position at his company. So if we can do it for the men, let's do it for the women too. And lastly, build consistent, robust diversity trainings aimed at educating the entire workforce on the challenges women face and building advocates for gender equity in the workplace. So I encourage you to leave here thinking about how you can take these steps, how you can take everything you've heard today and act now. Let's do it not just for the women of our families, the sisters, the wives, and the daughters, and the mothers in our families, but for all of the women in our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Okay, I love your energy, and I love the message that you just shared. Karen has been an amazing leader in our community this last year and taken on you can see her passion in helping us solve so many of these challenges. I just want to pause for a moment as we move into our last few conversations around where we're headed and where we head next, and to thank all the women who shared their stories and for the vulnerability that they shared in the conversations. I know we don't have all the answers for how we completely move out of the recession, but what we felt over the last probably 4 months is that the stories that you heard today are reflected of so many women in the community, and that there's probably nothing more important than having these conversations that are real, that are hard, that have been made up of so many challenges of the last year that we're just all barely getting and surviving. But you can also hear this like indomitable spirit of every one of these women in moving forward. So I'm really grateful that they all accepted the invitation and that they were willing to share the stories. If you were like me, right, you can feel the emotion of each of those individual women as they talked. And I'm really grateful for those stories because I think we need those, because they have to become the foundation of the programs that we will put in place to come out of the recession and be even stronger. So thank you all for sharing those. I'm also really excited to have Marina Storrs, who's with Pure Storage, talk today too. She shared on our advisory board call a couple of weeks ago some really great data about where we're headed. And as we're restructuring workforces and coming back to work and thinking about what hybrid means amidst all of these challenges that are still going to exist. And we felt like this conversation would be really helpful to all of us as to the things that companies are thinking about and how we're going to bring back a workforce and even bring more women back into the workforce with adjusting these. So Marina, I'm really glad to have you, and the time is all yours.
Thank you so much, Sydney. While I share the screen, can you guys see this?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, sounds great. It is such a privilege to be here with you today. So many powerful stories, so many powerful women. It's a small world. Actually, Dr. Matson was my mentor. It's going to date me about 20 years ago when I was a student. And then I had an opportunity to cross paths with Governor Olean Walker as I was working in the sphere of international affairs. And so we have many women to look up to. We have many stories to share and the camaraderie to build. So thank you for being here and thank you for having me. I will be talking a little bit about what a lot of people were referring as a silver lining in terms of where the future of work is heading. So by virtue of being an HRBP director at Pure Storage, and by the way, I know the name may seem like we're storing stuff, but Pure Storage is actually a leader in all-flash hardware and software for data storage. And so we are a high-tech company. And so I just wanted to clear that because, again, the observations that I had during my normal work is coming from a high-tech company, as well as I will couple it with the research done by the conference board. A lot of you are probably aware of the reviews and research and other stuff that they're sending out. And the main thing that I've heard in all the talks today is the desperate need for flexibility. So women as well as men who may require certain flexibility are seeking that. And the silver lining with the whole pandemic here is that the future is shifting towards a more flexible work mode. And points us to a notion that the traditional 5-day in the office 8 to 5 work week is coming to an end. And so I'm going to briefly talk about the 3 trends that we need to take into consideration as we're thinking through the future, and also do some call outs in terms of how does that affect women specifically in these trends. So without further ado, let's jump in the interest of time. So number 1 trend is that we are moving to a hybrid work mode, no doubt about it. So the survey that conference board sent out to about 313 companies across all the industries came back with an overwhelming 1/3 respondents thinking that 40% or more of their workforce will be working remotely after the pandemic. And so a large percent of the companies are following trend and expect a permanent shift to remote work once the pandemic is over. So this is perhaps the biggest shift that we're expecting from this whole pandemic. And even though the rise in remote work has started long before the pandemic set in, the story about that shift is very different depending on the demographics that you have, as well as the industry that you're in. So companies in high tech, in financial services are a lot more prone for a remote and set up for a remote type of work mode. Industries such as hospitality or manual labor, construction, are not. And so one size does not fit all in terms of the general trend in moving towards those. And then depending on your demographics, if you have, for example, a lot more of early in career folks, it's going to be difficult to make that promise because, as you know, early in career need a lot more hand-holding, a lot more mentorship, a lot more social interaction to make their assimilation into the company successful. And we at Pure have seen that firsthand. Pure has been an in-the-office company culture to begin with. And so, you know, the early in career folks that we've onboarded have struggled through this remote work arrangements. And so, you know, are there things and call outs that you've heard throughout the session is also there is a disproportionate ability to work among the minority groups. There's also considerations for economic situations. A lot of people cannot afford to have big houses and separate rooms for their offices, and so they're struggling to find a distraction-free, effective place to do their job well. And so all of those considerations will have to be taken into view before making the decision. But the fact that there is going to be a hybrid work mode is out of the question. And as far as women, so far the research is showing that women are more likely to accept or be willing to work remotely because that allows them that flexibility that they're seeking for taking care of their families or taking care of their lifestyle or whatever it may be. And so having said that, let's jump to the next one, the next trend as far as productivity. It is there's no question that the biggest concern about the move to the remote or hybrid work mode is productivity. The research shows that so far, the last 10 months have not negatively impacted. It didn't necessarily positive, impacted, but negatively, there was not a significant impact for those who have been working remotely. But the jury is still out in terms of how it all gonna plays out when people do return to work. The sentiment out there is that everybody has this collective commiseration right now, meaning we were sent home, we're making do with this situation, everybody's in the same boat, so therefore the productivity does not suffer. But when we do have a hybrid approach, some in the office, some remotely, the jury's still out on how those two sample groups are going to be waging in terms of productivity. And then last call out for productivity on this trend is that the sweet spot seems to be 1 to 3 days in working from home. Now, that does not necessarily mean that you move away, because obviously that takes your ability to come into the office. And so there's still considerations in terms of, is it better to work in the hybrid mode, meaning you're by the major hub, office hub, or is it better to just move away and be productive that way? As far as women, the productivity is very, very mixed. It's a mixed bag, because it depends on where the women are in terms of their life and career. So for example, mothers with early children, and you've heard so many stories, heartbreaking stories about childcare and affordability and, you know, having juggle things. So women who do have small children or elderly parents to take care of will have a hard time separating their work and life because of the constant distractions. Women like me who have older daughters, you know, the hybrid work mode is actually perfect because it provides me with enough flexibility for me to do my work well, at the same time, not to feel guilty that I'm failing as a mother. So again, a mixed bag on productivity, and also, you know, juries out there in terms of how the productivity will be measured and how the trend is going to go once some of us have an opportunity to go back to the office. All right. Last trend is what I call a real silver lining in all of this is people have progressive choices in terms of choosing where they live and how they do their jobs. And that determines the quality of life that they are choosing to have. So the research shows that in the next decade or so, people are going to be moving away from highly densely populated, overpriced, expensive geos and finding places where they can work remotely, for example, while accommodating their interests, whether it's skiing or being close to the beach or the lake or whatever. And so the map that you see on the slide, the rust-colored states, the conference board is calling them the Rust Belt, are the states where employers are allowing people to move away more and more because they're realizing that if they don't allow the flexibility of the lifestyle that their employees want, then, you know, basically they're going to lose that talent to their competitors. And so you will see that migration from those states, you know, outside so that the work can go with them as opposed to the other way around. So I know I'm probably over time and we need to wrap up here, but the thing that I would want to say is that there's a lot more consideration and considerations about what the future is looking like in terms of work mode. What I would say is any way you slice the data, and by the way, I've provided additional data if you wanted to dive deeper into this topic, but it's so clear that death of that 5-day 8 to 5 in the office work week is imminent. And so just rest assured that there's a lot of tribulations that this pandemic really brought with it, but there's a lot of opportunities in terms of specifically women choosing where they go, what careers they have because of the employers and the trends that are happening in the future of work. And just one last thing. I want to leave you with this quote that serendipitously came to me yesterday through an Instagram feed. And I thought, how perfect is this for our gathering today? She believed she could, and she almost did. But then a pandemic hit and someone asked her to do double the amount of work with the same amount of hours in the day. And someone else asked her to be the best version of herself while running on fumes. And she lost track of realistic expectations until she heard all the women talking today on the call. And then she realized that she wasn't alone, poured another cup of your choice of beverage, and decided her best self was enough. So thank you, everybody on the call for being you, for hanging in there. There are some really good changes coming your way, and hopefully we can all stay in touch so we can support each other through this journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Marina. That was like a perfect message and a perfect quote. I saw that show up in my feed also the other day. And I think you're right. Like, we are enough. And I think there's power in hearing these stories, not just in power in the relatability of what we're all facing and how we're going to navigate the future. So as we're just ending this, just a couple of more thoughts for you. And then we just have one announcement that we're making today. I think we can all agree that the recession is bigger than all of us, and it's not going to be fixed by the vaccine rollout that's happening right now. And that this is a time more than any other time that we have to be in action, and that we have to come together, and that we have to hear these stories, and we have to find the ways that we can all make a difference and really change the trajectory that we are on right now. You've heard these amazing insights. I can't even recap all of the great feedback that we heard from everyone and all of the actions that we can be on. I think they covered everything from what we can personally be doing to what our companies can be doing to what we need to be invested more in to make a difference as we go forward. There's a number of things that keep bubbling up to the top in conversations that we're having, and I'm just going to highlight them again because we heard them repeatedly today. Flexibility. A number of years ago, when we were building the inclusion framework inside of the Women Tech Council, we identified flexibility as the number one most critical determinant of the jobs women decided to take. And by flexibility, they never meant working fewer hours. It was in the environments, it was in the support, it was in the entire ecosystem. That remains largely the most important variable companies must embrace, and understanding what that is, and not just creating flexible environments, but allowing career progression for women to also exist in environments that are flexible. We have heard many times from women that they're not switching companies. And so in doing so, it has also meant that companies have to get better at promoting within. Largely in tech, we move companies to move up, but we have great talent in many of our companies. So how can we do better to promote from within? This whole conversation around empathetic and compassionate leadership, it's super critical. It's a skill we all have to develop and that we should expect from our leaders, and that companies will be required to transform into. Eventually my cough will leave me. And then this whole creativity on schedules. People are starting, and companies are starting to think about real part-time workforces around how you create creative work schedules that work, but will allow people to still have a voice and still have career growth. These are becoming really critical conversations. And then obviously the childcare conversation. We have got to be in action on that. Paige mentioned a number of things that are happening in the state, but that will be something that we're still not back up to. We lost 33 million childcare workers over the last year, and we have not recovered them. We have a long way to go on that. So we need our companies to also be invested with us on solving those problems. For all of us as individual women, the idea that Allison spoke about around our personal roadmap that we can be invested in, like, while it feels like there's a lot going on, making sure that we can focus on ourselves so that we can take care of all of the other things is also a really critical component. So take the time to invest in yourselves. And for all of the hundreds of people that are involved today, expanding your network, connecting with people, because as Trina said, right, we want to be able to, tap someone on the shoulder to help them. So much of the growth in the community comes out from all of us being willing to help each other, because opportunities come from each other. They come from community, and they also come for us asking for them when we need them. I think that it is equally important, not just for us to provide them, but sometimes we don't know everyone who needs our help. So being willing to stand up and say, hey, I need help with this, or how do I navigate, or I'm looking for this opportunity, is also equally critical at this point in time. I know that we've got a long way to go, but I know, and the thing that I've learned most over the last year is that there's probably not a stronger community, I would dare say, in the world than what I see in the Women Tech Council community, who have come together and who do everything to try to lift all tides and rise everyone up and overcome these challenges. And it's because of the individual strength of all of the women who make up the community. The thing that we wanted to do today, because it felt like, as we're in the midst of this first female recession, was brought on by the pandemic, that it would be a perfect time to announce the companies that are on the shatter list. We created the shatter list about 3 years ago to specifically focus on recognizing companies that were enacting best practices to help women shatter the glass ceiling. And at this point in time, the work that those companies are doing and the more work that they have to do, we have to shine a light on those great things so that we lift. We all know we're on a journey. The companies know that we're on a journey, but recognizing where there's many efforts, not just one, from executive leadership to the programming inside the companies to the community support, to the activations that are happening in those organizations. And so today we're rolling out, or we're announcing the Shatter List. It will be available immediately following this. And it's recognizing those companies that are in action. And these companies will also be the leaders to help us get out of the female recession and provide those opportunities and help us problem solve. So our last call to action for all of you is to join with us and to help us understand the issues and to be in action with us to help solve them as we work with our technology leaders, with government, with state, with the venture world, all of those ecosystems that work together that are going to become critical to turning this around. And every woman that you can help lift, we know helps, because fundamentally a loss for women is a loss for everyone. The impact to the economy and community and families. And it's something that we can't afford, and it's something that we can change. So thank you for taking the time to join us for the summit, for all these great conversations, and special thank you to all of the women who joined us and shared their stories today. I was immensely inspired by them, and I'm grateful that they were willing to share them and to help have the conversations that are critical for how we move forward. We hope everyone has a great weekend, and thank you for coming.